Raider Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report. And before we get into the breaking news around Ameer Abdullah and Brian Hoyer, today's show is presented by Manscaped. You don't want to be cut like Hoyer. You want to be re-signed like Ameer Abdullah. And to make sure that doesn't happen, go to manscaped.com, use code Raiders for 20% off and free shipping. That way, when you get rid of all that stuff, you're not just rocking a Zon, you're rocking a long Zon who likes to bang. So coming up here on today's show, we're going to be talking about the two things that the Raiders did, and it kind of inspired my entire idea of why I'm making the video that I am making. So first move that the Raiders made on Friday was they released quarterback Brian Hoyer. It's like a $2 million dead cap hit, and you save $92,000, which in NFL terms is literally like a box of Pop-Tarts. The other move that the Raiders ended up making was they re-signed Ameer Abdullah. I will admit, I'm a little bit surprised by this move considering the fact that Abdullah was signed by the Raiders 2 seasons ago. That way, he was able to join Kennedy Polamalu. Kennedy Polamalu was the Raiders' old running back coach. He is now with the Seattle Seahawks. But I wouldn't look at this as like a running back move. I would look at this more as a special teams type of move. Like Ameer Abdullah is more of a pass-catching running back, and it is more of a kick returner type of ordeal. And this has nothing, and I don't think this has anything to do with Josh Jacobs. Unfortunately, we don't have the contract numbers out yet on Abdullah, but I don't anticipate that this is going to be more than $3 million. I'm hoping that it's going to be $2 million for this upcoming season. But this is exactly why you hit that subscribe button. It's exactly why you turn on those notifications. Like, with the amount of information that is going to be coming out today, tomorrow, Sunday, Monday, all next week, Jeremy Chuggs and I, we're literally going to be live from Monday to Friday next week. I don't want you to miss it. We're going to be balling. It's going to be a hell of a time here on the Raiders Report. So coming up, I got 6 moves that the Las Vegas Raiders could potentially make right now before NFL free agency. I'm going to be honest. There are 4 moves on here that are very likely, or 3 that are very likely, 1 that is likely, and then there is another one there. The other 2 moves are just a possibility. And if you're not watching this show live right now, you better tune in live because this shit is about to get wild. So the 6 moves coming up here are just my predictions. And the first one is the Las Vegas Raiders, they are going to cut Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, I'll be honest, I've actually had some people recently tell me that there is a possibility that Jimmy G is not designated as a post-June 1st cut because I anticipate that he is going to be a post-June 1st cut. However, I have been told that there is a chance that they don't do that because they want to be able to use the money saved by Garoppolo right away. If they cut Jimmy G right away and it's not a post-June 1st cut, it's a $17 million dead cap hit and you get $11.25 million to spend right away. Now, what I think would be the smarter thing to do is just designate him as that post-June 1st cut candidate. That way the Raiders save $24.7 million. Yes, I understand that you don't get that money until after June 1st, but if you're a smart organization, you still can operate your cap accordingly, and that's what they have Delaney for, who's a very smart person. But the Raiders, they got to cut Garoppolo by March 17th. Like, it has to happen. If they don't cut him by March 17th, then he makes $11.25 million. How many people watching the show right now want Jimmy Garoppolo to make $11.25 million on the Raiders this season? I know I don't. And if you want the Raiders to cut Jimmy G, I want you to click that like button because as far as I'm concerned, let's get rid of all the Josh McDaniels pieces. Brian Hoyer, bon voyage. Brandon Bolden, you better not bring him back. Jimmy Garoppolo, hasta la vista, baby. Let's go to the next name here of moves that the Raiders could make. They're going to end up cutting Hunter Renfrow. And I know Renfrow is a player that is still like, you know, the nation rallies behind, but it's also been 2 years. His first 3 years with the Las Vegas Raiders, he was one of my favorite players. He was one of the most fun players to watch out there on the field because he was playing backyard football and getting open. The last 2 years, he's that player that when he steps out in the backyard football, he gets picked last and nobody wants him on his team. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. When he's been on the field, he hasn't been good on top of that. And I do anticipate that the Raiders are going to designate him as a post-June 1st cut candidate. That's going to save Las Vegas about $11.9 million. Sure, you're going to eat a little bit of money, but at the end of the day, the Raiders know that they are not going to be able to trade Renfrow. I'm telling you right now, the only trade value that he might have is if you can get a 7th-round pick in the 2025 NFL draft. The Raiders have had to try, they've tried to trade Renfrow for almost 2 years now. Nobody wants him. People know that he's not very good anymore. He's got injury issues. And if you look at PFF and you care about PFF wide receiver rankings, he was the worst wide receiver in the National Football League last season. The Raiders like Renfrow, and they're going to do right by him. So by designating a post-June 1st cut, he still has the opportunity to go sign with some other teams. The Raiders just save that money, and they don't get the $11.88 million until after June 1st. So here's your opportunity to be the GM, because I like Hunter Renfrow. And I think if you asked 100 Raider fans, all 100 people would say, yeah, I like Hunter Renfrow. But that's not what this show's about. That's not what jobs are about. That's not what this organization is about. It's just win, baby. And you can like somebody, but you still have to be able to make the right decisions in order to get to the ultimate goal, which is a Lombardi trophy. So here's your opportunity. Be Tom Telesco. Be the GM. Should the Raiders cut Hunter Renfrow? This is going to be the pinned comment here on today's show. Cut or keep? My answer is cut. So, what do you guys have to say? Let me know. Scroll on down. Should the Raiders cut or keep Hunter Renfrow? When you look at the numbers over the past 2 seasons, it's obvious to me. Now, the 2021 outlier, I also think that has a lot to do with the fact that, let's face it, the Raiders were relying on Henry Ruggs. That situation is what it is, and Renfrow was forced to be the #1 wide receiver. Also that year, Darren Waller was very, very injured and couldn't really get into the mix at all. Over the past 2 seasons, though, 36 grabs, and then last year, 25 catches, 255 yards. I mean, Renfrow cost the Raiders multiple games over the past 2 seasons. He has a fumbling problem. He has a confidence problem. And I think at this point, if I'm Renfrow and I'm his agent, there is one team and one team only that I am trying to sign with this upcoming offseason, and that's the New Orleans Saints. Coming up here, I'm going to tell you 4 other moves that I anticipate that the Raiders could potentially make before free agency begins. But if you don't already know, man, I don't know what I got to tell you at this point. Today's show is sponsored by Manscaped, and I love Manscaped because they have been rocking with us here for about 4 years. And when you build that type of relationship with somebody, it is very special because they allow me to say the off-the-wall shit that I love to be able to say. But on top of that, I want to be able to work with a brand that is very similar to me. And I also want to be able to support a brand that is very similar to me. If you were to ask me, Mitch, what is the brand that represents you totally? It's freaking Manscaped, man. And if you want to go get started, go to manscaped.com. Use code Raiders for 20% off and free shipping. And I know it's March, and I'm really excited about March because
the luck of the Manscaped!
The luck of the Manscaped. Embrace the luck of the Irish and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped. Head over to manscaped.com. Use code Raiders for 20% off and free shipping. This year, don't just chase rainbows. Make your own pot of gold and groom your little leprechaun or girthy leprechaun with just with Manscaped, the leaders in below-the-kilt care. Say goodbye to your clover forest with Manscaped's Lawnmower 5.0 and let your confidence shine bright. I don't know about y'all. I like my Ken Stabler, and I want my Ken Stabler to be living in a nice groomed area. I'm not saying that I go Brazilian. I have also not saying that I don't go Brazilian, but I don't want a George W. just wrapped around my Kenny Stabes. You know what I'm talking about? On top of that, they offer a bunch of different products that I do think that a lot of people would like. I know Father's Day is a little bit of a ways away, but if you're looking for, this might be weird, stocking stuffers out there in terms of like little gift ideas, whether it's somebody's birthday, whether it's extra gift just for saying thank you for whatever, I do think Manscaped's products are really awesome products, and I also love that they're beard hedger. Like Jugs and I think we have a great beard game. So if you want to go get started with products that we use and that we trust on a daily basis, go to manscaped.com, use code Raiders for 20% off and free shipping on the best male grooming products out there. All right, we're going to keep this thing rocking and rolling, and to make sure that you don't get cut, use Manscaped. All right, the next move that I could see the Raiders doing is cutting Brandon Facyson. So when I started the show, I said 3 moves are very likely. Very likely moves. The Raiders are going to move on from Facyson. And, let's face it, the dude barely played last season. Played in only a few games, and when he was on the field was not all that inspiring. It was kind of confusing in the general when the Raiders ended up signing him just because I couldn't quite figure out what the connection was. Facyson, though, is going to be a free agent in 2025, and he was injured the entire season with that shin injury. If you end up cutting him, you do save $3.3 million. You have to end up eating $350K, which it is what it is at that point. But, Again, you're saving some money by moving on from Brandon Facyson, which I do think is the correct move. It's the right move for the Raiders to do as they march forward, and you can save as much money as possible. Like if I told you right now, $3.3 million to be able to go out and just get a backup linebacker, just somebody that's going to be able to add a little bit more to your game. Like $3.3 million for Greg Van Roten right now or Brandon Facyson. I'm not saying I want Greg Van Roten to be a starter, but I would like to have Greg Van Roten back to be a backup quality offensive lineman. Let's go to the next thing that the Raiders could potentially do, re-sign Josh Jacobs. Now, I spoke with Jacobs' team on Monday earlier this week, and they didn't really tell me anything based on money or based on contract, like dollar amount. But what they did tell me is they had a very good conversation with Tom Delaney and Tom Telesco at the NFL Combine, so things are at least progressing in the right way. We know that both sides want to get a deal done, and if Jacobs hits the open market, it might cost the Raiders more. Like, if Antonio Pierce legitimately wants to get Josh Jacobs back, they should try to get a deal done before free agency. If you want to gamble a little bit and you just want to see what his market is like, fine, and maybe that's what the signing of Ameer Abdullah is. It's just like a little bit more insurance just in case Jacobs does not return to the silver and black. But at the end of the day, like, if the Raiders' plan is to bring him back, you should try to put a plan in place to get him back before free agency, because it's going to be, I don't want to say a feeding frenzy, but there's going to be multiple teams out there interested in Jacobs. I'm not allowed to share with you the teams that have already shown interest in Jacobs, and I know that Jacobs' team has met with some other NFL teams. However, like, at the end of the day, if that's your guy, prove it, bring him back here, and let's keep this thing running. Coming up, I got 2 bold predictions before free agency. So when I did this video, I was like, all right, like, let's do things that are going to happen. Let's do things that might happen. And then, like, let's do 2 things that are a little bit more off the wall, but they have the potential to happen. So the next thing that's going to be coming up here is this. The Raiders signing Xavien Howard. So there are certain players that can sign right now, and there are certain players that cannot sign right now. Since Xavien Howard was released by the Miami Dolphins, he has the ability to sign anywhere right now. So if the Raiders wanted to bring in Howard, I think it's a possibility. The reason why I'm throwing this idea out there is because Antonio Pierce said that finding a cornerback one for this team, for this organization, was a priority. Also, on top of that, Howard has worked with Patrick Graham before, when Graham was the defensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins back in 2019. Xavien Howard has also been a part of teams that have had Rob Leonard, who's the Raiders defensive line coach, and Gerald Alexander, who is the Raiders safety coach. And Howard had 15 interceptions in the 2 years when Gerald Alexander was the defensive backs coach in Miami. So the 2 best years that Xavien Howard has ever had was with Gerald Alexander. I get it. It was in 2020. It was in 2021. His best years are probably behind him, and he has struggled a little bit last season more than what I've liked. I'm not sitting up here saying, hey, let's go give Xavien Howard $10 million per year. No, that's not what I'm saying. But if it's true that you are looking for a legit outside cornerback, number one, then I would say Howard is at least a name to keep in mind. And if you're like, you know what? I don't want to get into the bidding war. I don't want to get into the free agency frenzy. Then I do think that signing him before all of this happens could potentially be a smart move that pays major dividends, because if he's healthy and motivated, he could still be one of the best corners in the National Football League. So how about this? Let's just say that Josh Jacobs and Xavien Howard are both $10 million per year, okay? This is the game that I like to play, because if I'm playing Telesco, Antonio Pierce GM role, these are the conversations, these are the decisions that sometimes you got to make. If you would say, we'll give Josh Jacobs $10 million this year, but that means you can't get Xavien Howard, or would you rather give $10 million to Xavien Howard and then not get Josh Jacobs? I want to see your answers down below, and if you want my answer, hit me up on IG at Mitchell Renz 365. Let's go to the final one here, and it's signed Patrick Peterson. So Peterson was released by the Pittsburgh Steelers today on Friday, and the Steelers have been making a multitude of moves. They actually just released, also on top of that, Allen Robinson, which is a pretty interesting move. Yeah, and they signed Fehoko. But for Patrick Peterson, this is another guy that I get it. He's past his prime. But if I was Peterson, I would look at this past season and go, you know what? Why is this year a little bit of an outlier for me? It's because he played safety. Now, don't get me wrong. He is probably going to be signed to be a corner slash safety, but I also know that the Raiders really value versatility, and the Raiders safety coach, Gerald Alexander, worked with him last season in Pittsburgh, and there was a lot of people that are like, Patrick Peterson, he's washed, he's not good anymore, and he struggled at corner because he doesn't have that step anymore, but he is an intelligent player, and when you put him back there at safety, because he had to take over for Minkah Fitzpatrick once he went down for Pittsburgh, Peterson actually did a halfway decent job. So if you're the Raiders and you go, all right, we can bring Patrick Peterson on a cheaper deal, let's say like $4 million per year, essentially what they ended up giving Marcus Peters last year, and you have somebody that has that flexibility to play safety and could potentially play cornerback in a pinch, that has relationships with Gerald Alexander, who's, again, been a very successful safety defensive backs coach in his NFL career, I do think it's a low-risk, potentially high-reward move that the Raiders could make before NFL free agency. So here are some moves that I could see the Raiders making: cutting Garoppolo, Renfrow, and Brandon Facyson, re-signing Josh Jacobs, and then signing Xavien Howard and Patrick Peterson before free agency starts. Again, this video was created because there was some breaking news, and if you're watching this live, get ready to pull up here and have a good time. If you're not watching this live, then, hey, this is your opportunity to tune in. But the Raiders, they cut Brian Hoyer to save $92,000, and they have also re-signed running back Ameer Abdullah. We don't know how long the contract is. We do not know the money or how much it's worth. My projection is 1 year, somewhere between $1.5 and $2 million for Ameer Abdullah.